And good morning, everyone. Happy Tuesday morning to you, and welcome back to Morning Musings. My name is Don K. Preston. I am the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma. Now, before I continue, do not forget this upcoming Saturday, October the 12th, 2024, I'll be engaged in a formal debate with Dr. Richard Carrier. Dr. Richard Carrier is an atheist. He has written several books, and he believes that Jesus lied at the least or failed in his predictions. We will be debating the topic insofar as the Gospels or the New Testament uh, accurately records the words of Jesus. His predictions of his coming and the end of the age failed. So that's the topic. That's what he'll be affirming. I will be denying that. And let me say this, folks. Mike Sullivan and I, on our last week's Preterist Apologetics, Mike made the comment that is absolutely, teetotally, 100% correct. The full preterist view is the only view of eschatology that has an answer to men like Richard Carrier. No futurist view of eschatology can answer the challenge of Christ. The challenge of Christ, Jesus said, if I do not do the works which my Father has given me, do not believe me. If I do, then though you do not believe in me, believe the works. Dr. Richard Carrier says, everybody knows Jesus predicted his coming, at the end of world history, to bring time to an end, etc., etc. And he said it was going to happen in the first century. But of course, everybody knows Jesus didn't come and put an end to time and human history. Well, yes, we do know that he didn't come out of heaven as a 5'5" Jewish man and bring an end to human history. We do know that. The problem of it is, Jesus never predicted that kind of coming. Absolutely never predicted that kind of coming. That's what I will seek to prove in this debate. So, all of that said, I'm going to give my voice a rest tomorrow, which is Wednesday, as well as Thursday, my normal break from my videos. I will be filming again, producing videos for Friday morning, as I continue my review and response to the book by Brian Hodge, The Problems with Preterism. And Mike Sullivan and I will do our regular Preterist Apologetics on Friday night. But my voice is feeling weak because I had so many different blog interviews this last week. I did so much filming last week. I've been trying to do this and that and the other. So my voice is weak. So I'm going to give it a 2-day break, and then I'll be back with you on Friday. So yesterday, we did a little bit of recapitulation. I shared with you in our study of Sukkot. Now, don't forget, this month's 2-book special, Resurrection Feast Fulfilled, a study of Israel's last feast days, which was Sukkot, and The End of the Law, Torah to Tell Us, Volume 1. Going to save you $20. Go to my website and order the books. Okay. So in the book, Resurrection Feast Fulfilled, I document that Sukkot, which is the last of the 7 feast days, Sukkot represented, symbolized, foreshadowed, prophesied the resurrection. Among other things, it was called, and this is now, I think, my 4th video, perhaps 5th, on the meaning of the joy of the nations. And it was called the joy of the nations because on Sukkot, not on any other of the feast days, but on Sukkot, special offerings were made for all the nations of the earth. Not just for Israel, but for all nations of the earth. And I went back to Zechariah chapter 14 to set the stage for our examination of the book of Revelation. Zechariah 14, very, very quickly. Day of the Lord, day of the Lord against Jerusalem, the Lord's coming with all of his saints, the Lord's creation of a new Jerusalem, the river of life flowing out from the throne of God in the New Jerusalem to bring life and healing to the nations. And then, after that day of the Lord, all the nations of the earth would come to Zion, come to Jerusalem to celebrate Sukkot. Now, once again, I'm not going to delve into the question of whether or not it's talking about literally observing the literal feast, because obviously I don't believe that it does. I believe this is symbolic. Okay? The nations of the earth are not being predicted to come to literal physical Zion/Jerusalem. No. Zion is a spiritual city. It's the church of the living God. And it's not in a geographical location per se, to where the nations of the earth can come to one centralized location, one venue. Well, that ought to give us insight into the nature of celebrating Sukkot. It would be a celebration of the fulfillment of what Sukkot represented, what it prophesied, what it foreshadowed in type. So, once again, with that background and rehearsal, I want to go to Revelation chapter 7. In Revelation, and the background of this, of course, Revelation chapter 6. John said, under the sounding of the fifth seal, or opening of the fifth seal, he said, I saw under the altar the souls of those who had been slain for the word of God and for the testimony which they had. And they cried out, How long, O Lord, holy and true, do you not avenge us on those who were on the earth? And they were all given white robes, and they were told to rest for a little while until the fellow brethren who should be slain, such as they were, should be fulfilled. Okay, so they're waiting on their vindication, number one. Their vindication would be the judgment of those who had slain them. They're waiting for the filling up of the number of the martyrs to be slain. Rest for a little while until their fellow brethren who should be slain as they were should be filled up. When would they be vindicated? At the day of the Lord, Revelation 6:12-17. That day of the Lord would be in fulfillment of Malachi. It would be in fulfillment of Isaiah 2-4. I don't have time to go into that. So the vision is they're waiting. They're waiting on the filling up of the measure of sin and the number of the martyrs. They're waiting. All right. Well, in chapter 7, what do we find? Well, sometimes it's called an interlude, but nonetheless, what we find is beginning with verse 4. You have reference to 144,000 saints. And by the way, these saints are sealed to God. These saints are 12,000 out of every tribe of Israel. Now, interestingly enough, what we find here is that Dan and Ephraim are not listed. A lot of speculation on that. The general belief is that the reason they're not listed is because of their long, unbroken history of rebellion and apostasy. Be that as it may, you nonetheless have a remnant. A remnant of the righteous of Israel. Now, a word here that's very, very important. Throughout the Tanakh, that is the Old Testament, God never, ever, ever promised to save the totality of Israel. He never promised to save, quote, all Israel. In Isaiah chapter 10, 20 and following, the Lord said, Isaiah said, except the Lord had given us a remnant, we would be like Sodom, we would be like Gomorrah. So here's a promise, and by the way, Paul quotes this in Romans chapter 9 to speak of the salvation of the remnant that was taking place in the first century. So here's a promise that Paul applies to his day and his time, his generation, and says that God's promise to Israel was not the corporate nation as a whole, but it was the righteous remnant. The body of Israel would be destroyed. The remnant would be saved. You have a parallel book, Amos chapter 5. The Lord said, the city that goes out 100 shall return 10. The city that goes out 1,000 shall return 100. The virgin daughter of Israel is fallen and will not rise again. But the Lord would save a remnant. Now that's talking about the Assyrian captivity. Only a remnant would return from that. But that literal physical reality served as a type of the coming salvation of the spiritual remnant of Israel in the last days. And there are too many Old Testament passages that talk about the salvation of the remnant in the last days. Never, ever all of Israel. Even Romans chapter 11, and so all Israel shall be saved, has to be viewed through the prism of what? The salvation of the remnant. Again, Romans chapter 9, Paul talks about the salvation of the remnant. He quotes one text after another to the effect that God said he was going to save a remnant. And then he said, a short work will the Lord make on the earth. What's the short work? The salvation of the remnant. And Paul says he will cut that work short in righteousness. It will not be an extended work. And yet, you know what? Men such as N.T. Wright say that work of the salvation of the remnant, which would bring Israel's salvation history to its climax. No, N.T. Wright says the salvation of the remnant is still taking place today because every single time a Jew turns to Christ, N.T. Wright says that's a little bit of resurrection. That's a little bit of the salvation of the remnant. That's a little bit of the salvation of all Israel. No, Paul said the salvation of the remnant would not be an extended, protracted process. A short work will the Lord make on the earth. So when we look at Romans chapter 11, the salvation of all Israel is in fact the salvation of all the remnant. Now I say all that to bring us to Revelation chapter 7 and 14 and the rest of the book. Okay? Here is John's, and he sees the 144,000 out of all 12 tribes. Wait a minute. That's not all he sees. After these things, I looked, and behold, a great multitude which no man could count. He just got through counting 144,000 out of the 12 tribes. The righteous remnant. And God never promised to save anything more than the righteous remnant of Old Covenant Israel. Only the righteous remnant of Israel. But now, in addition to the righteous remnant of Israel out of all 12 tribes, John says, I saw a great multitude which no one could count from every nation. Now, he's already talked about the 12 tribes. Now he's talking about every nation. Every nation is not the 12 tribes. The 12 tribes are not every nation. The 12 tribes constitute the totality of the salvation of the remnant of all 12 tribes of Israel. Now, in addition to that 144,000, I saw a great multitude that no man could number out of every nation and every tribe and people and tongue, standing before the throne and before the Lamb, clothed in white robes, and palm branches were in their hands. Wait a minute. What was in their hand? Palm branches. Here is the feast of Sukkot. And you know what? I'm out of time. I will pick this up next Monday, perhaps Tuesday, because I'll have to give a recap of the debate, my own personal recap of that. But in the meantime, thank you so much for joining me for this morning's Morning Musings. Remember, no video tomorrow, no video Thursday. Be back with you Friday. Got to give my voice a little bit of a break. Saturday, my debate with Dr. Richard Carrier. So, Lord willing, hope to see you on Friday.